Hello, my name is Joseph Beige. I'm a real estate attorney on Long Island, and I want to welcome you to today's program. What we do on this program is very simple if you're a first-time viewer. We discuss various real estate subjects that would be of interest to you, the Long Island real estate consumer. And our goal is also very simple. The idea is for you to gain a little more knowledge so that you can make a better, more informed decision on your next real estate transaction. Whether we're talking about Nassau or Suffolk County, towns or villages, there's one thing they all have in common, and that's any structure that's on a property, residential or commercial, has to meet certain building codes. Proof that they've met the building code is by the issuance of what's called a Certificate of Occupancy, or a CO. Now, the problem is that not every structure on the premises has a CO. Lots of times people add bathrooms or convert garages to living space. Sometimes we have on a retail side, was a store, now becomes a restaurant, and that requires a change in some of the work and a new CO being issued. Trying to get a CO and get through the building department maze can be a little daunting, especially to homeowners. And that's where a profession of real estate expediters comes in. It's a profession that's out there, and a lot of people don't know about it, and those that do don't really understand what they do and what they don't do. So today we're going to be talking about real estate expediters, and I'm joined with Christine Fay of Accurate Expediting Services. And Christine, thank you very much for being here today.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for inviting me.
Christine, before we get too into what a real estate expediter does and so forth, can you just give everybody a little bit of your background?
Sure. I started expediting when I was about 19 years old. My father had opened up a construction company, and we used to hire an attorney to do permit processing. And what happened was my father was like, Christine, you have the personality, you can do it. So by the time I was 23, I started doing it. I started going to the towns. I started getting to know the people in the towns. So that's basically how I got started with my father. He had a construction company, and I did all the permits for him.
Excellent. Excellent. So now tell us a little bit about Accurate Expediting. Where did that come in?
So Accurate Expediting, my father enabled me to open up my own company within his company. So Accurate Expediting was formed as like a little side business also in conjunction with his construction company. So I opened up my company. My dad was phasing out of construction, and he knew I could stand on my own, so I opened up Accurate Expediting. I had the background of knowing all the people, the different towns, and I just got to know, each different town. So
excellent. Now, I want to switch over now and talk about real estate expediting services a little more in general. And what is a typical service that a real estate expediter would provide?
So people will call me up. They'll go on my website. They'll call me up and they'll say, we're selling our house. There's something on our house that they built an addition, a garage conversion, like you said, added a bathroom. And so in order to stop the process from being stopped,
right, keep the sale moving forward, sure.
You need to have a CO. So they would come to me and say, most of the times people are in a panic. They're like, oh my God, we're selling our house. It's going to get held up. That's what I meant by stop. It's getting held up, so we need your service. So then I would go to their house, meet with them, take a look at the structure they built, go over the paperwork, and I'm basically the liaison between the homeowner and the town. So
Now again, expediters also deal with residential as well, and not always coming in as that problem solving when, again, there's a gun to everybody's head trying to get a real estate transaction done. I assume some clients come to you ahead of the game, so to speak.
Yes, so that's when somebody should actually come to me. Somebody should come to me before they build. This way they're not caught up. So somebody would come to me and say, we'd like to build an addition on a house, a dormer. And so if they had architect plans and a survey already, then I process that. If not, I can recommend architects, surveyors, and then I take that paperwork and I work with the architects and then I submit. Sometimes people need a variance, and I also appear in court for the homeowner. So it takes like the edge off of the homeowner. Most people call in a panic. Some people will call ahead of time, which is what I recommend. I recommend that people call ahead of time.
It almost sounds like you quarterback the process.
Basically.
Okay. Well, that's a big part of it, because essentially that's a lot of what an attorney does in a real estate transaction as well, is we quarterback the process. We deal with the title companies, we deal with the real, the lenders, attorneys, and everybody everybody, and we quarterback the transaction. And it sounds a lot like that's what a real estate expediter does for the homeowner, that they quarterback all these different moving parts with the building department and the permitting process and so forth.
It's kind of like I'm in a circus and I'm a juggler.
I know that feeling very well. Trust me. Trust me. Sometimes I feel like I'm juggling chainsaws the way.
Exactly.
Now, again, having been in real estate for as long as I have, it's amazing how many myths and misconceptions my clients have about expediters. And sometimes I'm the one who has to set them straight. And, the first thing, is number one is real estate expediters it is legal. There's nothing nefarious here. There's nothing under the table, right?
Right.
Okay.
So we are legal. There's nothing that says we can't do what we're doing.
Now, the most important thing, and I think that this is something, it's funny, clients, a lot of people don't know that this profession exists. And when they do find out, either from myself or maybe, the real estate agent says, oh, we can hire an expediter, we can help you out. They kind of I think they've watched too many mafia movies. They think that the expediter is somebody who's going to be doing something, sliding envelopes, maybe, things of that nature, making the problems go away. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way, does it? No,
it doesn't. So we still have to follow the rules. We have to file the proper paperwork. There's no slipping money under the table. There's no, you can't do that. Back in the day.
Well, I don't know.
No, but seriously, there's none of that. I mean, an experienced expediter knows the paperwork, and the town knows, my paperwork. I've been doing it for 31 years. So they know when I bring in a transaction, paperwork's going to be right, hence the name Accurate Expediting. So, the myth is that I have a crystal ball and that I know, what's going to happen. So no, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't. I'm basically the liaison. I'm there to help people who, they're working. They don't have time to do this. That's what I do. Let me do the legwork. That's my little logo.
But I think it's also it's not just doing the work and the legwork. It's that you're comfortable with the process, and that's why a lot of times clients will come to me on certain things. Certainly even outside the real estate, and be like, do I need an attorney? And it's like, no, you're certainly capable. There's nothing in the law that says you must retain an attorney, but the question becomes, should you? I'm probably capable of changing the oil in my car, but I don't, because I know I won't do it as well or as efficient as my mechanic does it.
Right.
And again, you talked about complying with everything. You still have to comply with the building codes, all of the different things. And it's funny because I've had clients who have called me up upset at the expediter because they didn't think that they had to. And it's like, no, there's no shortcuts here. And one of the things is that to make sure people understand building codes, especially when you're dealing with the electric and the plumbing, but certainly the electric, gas, anything of that nature, exists to protect people.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, when you do your job, it still has to be inspected by a town inspector who's putting their name, their license, and their town liability. So there is no shortcuts.
There's no shortcuts. And then at the end of the day, you're providing a CO, a Certificate of Occupancy, which means you can legally live in that space that you built. So yes, and I always tell people that want to take the shortcut, there's no sense in taking a shortcut because it is for the safety and welfare of your family. And then a lot of people complain about basements. Basements are a thing that people complain about. You have to have egress windows. And I always tell people, if you have a child in the basement and there's a fire, it makes sense to have egress windows. You need the firemen to come in, and, a lot of people are like, oh, we don't want to do it. We don't want to spend the money, but it behooves them to spend the money.
That is interesting because there are, especially in the current market, we're taping this in the fall of 2021. The real estate market on Long Island is extremely hot, tight, however you want to describe it, and buyers are frequently waiving things that a year or 2 years ago they never would have.
Right.
And they're buying houses and they're waiving issues like COs on additions, bathrooms, conversions to living space, certainly. And a big issue is that I have a discussion with clients is whenever there's below grade basement living space, because it's not just not having the CO, it's not just that you may be kicking the problem down the road for when you, the buyer, become a seller in the future. But again, like you said, you're going to be living in that house. You want those COs and you want to make sure that they were done properly. And again, it's funny. I've had clients who come back and are upset that they have to do more work because they thought that they dug a trench 6 inches when it was supposed to be 18 inches, for example, and they thought, well, the expediter would make that go away. And I think if there's anything that you take away from this is that the expediters quarterback and help you navigate the system. Exactly. They don't help. There's no shortcuts. And if you think the expediter is going to be able to help you avoid doing the work, it's just not going to work.
Right.
Okay. Now, if I can, let's talk a little bit more about Just Accurate. And what's your typical client for us?
So my typical client will call me and say, I'm ready to build something on my house. What do I do? So, like I said before, I recommend the architect, surveyor, and then we get the paperwork together, and then I submit. Another client would come to me in a panic. Oh, I have a realtor. We're selling my house. We need a CO on something. So then that's like rush. And I understand the process because I'm also a realtor. So I understand the timeline. So those jobs I have to jump on immediately because I understand the people's, they're anxious. They want their house to close. So a typical client will either be someone in a panic or someone who wants to build something on their house and do it the right way.
Now, when we're talking about COs, so these are generally governed by either on a town level, township, or on a village level. Do you see a much difference in variation between the different towns in terms of how efficient they are?
The town that I do a lot of work in is Islip. Islip all day long. Different other counties like Nassau County, it takes a little bit longer. Now with COVID, there's more online processing. So the question being a timeline, some towns can take 30 days to get a CO if it's a certificate of compliance. Other towns can take longer. So it really depends on the influx of applications that they're getting. So to say how long it's going to take, I'd have to go to that specific town when I submit and say, okay, how long is this going to take? So, yeah.
Now you used the term there, certificate of compliance. Now, the Certificate of Occupancy and the Certificate of Compliance are two different animals.
Yes.
All right. Can you just basically explain what they are?
So a Certificate of Compliance is on a structure that has been built prior. So it's something in ISLIP, say it's something that was built 4 years or more. So they don't require architectural drawings. They just require a floor plan. They require a fee. Sometimes the fees can be doubled, tripled, depending on which town. So a certificate of compliance is on structures that are already built. So that's what that is. And then that leads to a CO.
You also handle commercial transactions to an extent, too.
Yes, I do.
What's your typical commercial client for Accurate Expediting?
So commercial clients would be, Elite Motorsports. They had contacted me. They did some interior renovations. I've legalized several commercial buildings. Usually it's interior alterations and, compliance, sprinkler systems, carbon monoxide, safety.
Dealing with the certificate of compliance for existing structures.
Yeah.
And we've talked about codes. Now, when you have a structure that, for example, like you said, in ISIP, if it's over 4 years, it would be a certificate of compliance.
Yes.
What code does that structure have to apply to? In other words, does it have to apply to an electrical code that was older, that was 4 or 5 years old, or the current one that exists?
So what happens is if there's no electrical certificate, we call in a separate company. They come in and inspect because obviously the electric was not inspected while the work was being done, unless people did have it done and they're holding on to the certificate. But in that case, we would call in a separate company. They would come and inspect. If there's anything wrong with it, then they have to bring it up to code to 2021,
Gotcha.
Today's standards.
So basically, whenever you apply for whether it's a certificate of compliance or a certificate of occupancy, the code standard that you have to meet is the current one in effect at that
Yes, because basically, if you built something before, if you built something prior and you didn't get a permit, the town is going to penalize you. And tell you, you went ahead and built it, so now you have to comply with today's standards.
And as a general rule, how often do the standards change?
Oh, that's funny. I'm always calling up the town going, what's different today? What happened today? Did I miss anything? They change. It varies on what needs to be changed. The town does change.
And have you found that having to comply with the current code on an older structure to be a real issue for clients?
Yeah, it depends on what it is. If it's an electrical issue, I mean, it's really up to the inspector too.
Interesting. I have to ask you about one. In-ground pools tend to be an issue because they're there. People put up a fence because they know they need a fence. But it's funny how many clients come to me with a permit, especially for in-ground pools, but also for extensions. They get the permit, but they never get the final CO. And sometimes I've had clients where it's been 30 years since the time they got the permit, and now they're selling the house. What kind of challenges does that present for you?
So one of the reasons why people don't finish their COs, because they come to me with that too, is because fencing. A lot of times people have fencing. They have stockade fencing, and they put the fence the wrong way, and there's safety issues. And they don't want to do it at the time, so they just let it go. There's electrical underwriters that need to be, that they have a certificate for that too. So a lot of people just let it go. And a lot of times the pool companies, they let it go too and say it's the homeowner's responsibility. So it's like they're against each other. It's like, oh, you were supposed to get it. No, you were supposed to get it. Then they come to me and they're like, Christine, we have this pool. It's been here for 30 years. Now what? Sometimes the pool company will put a pool in too close to the property line, tell the homeowner, oh, no, it's okay, and then they need a variance. So they come to me, and I have to file a variance and then explain to the town why the pool company put the pool where it was, and then the homeowner has to get the permits, they have to get a CO, and they have to follow the law. Sometimes they have to move a fence, change a fence, things like that, safety.
Now, you used the term here, and we probably should have defined it earlier on. You used getting a variance.
Oh.
Now, getting a variance, basically, what does that mean? And to the average person who's buying a real estate, when they hear, that they're in a deal or they're trying to get a CO so they can complete a real estate transaction, and then you come back and you say, guess what, we're going to need a variance.
Okay. So a variance is a special exception. It's a diversion from the code. So say if a pool has to be, the code says 10 feet and you built it 8 feet, we need a variance for 2 feet.
You mean from the property line?
A 2-foot exception. So the code is 10 feet, you built it 8 feet, so you need a variance. So I go file the paperwork, I appear in front of the board and explain to them why they built it at 8 feet instead of 10 feet. If you're coming to me new as a new build, and you need a variance, I do the research with zoning, I do the research with planning, and 9 times out of 10, I get the variance approved because I won't take a case that's crazy. I will do all the research and make sure that it does get approved. So my track record with variances is very, very good.
And I think that's again, like a lot of things that the law touches on. It's good to get somebody who's going to give you straight answers and tell you right up, because otherwise you can spend a lot of money. Only, again, you want to know what your odds are. And there are some people, I'm sure, who aren't as clear cut with what the odds are. And they'll take on any case, they'll take the fee, and then the client at the end finds out afterwards that they only had a 1 in 10 chance of getting it. They might have made a different decision. So that's very good, and that shows a lot of integrity. That
happens a lot. You know what? I'm a straight shooter. One thing you'll get with me at Accurate Expediting is honesty. Reliability. I answer the phone. I show up when I say I'm going to show up. I love what I do, and I have a good relationship with the townships.
Typical client. Okay. Let's say we got a homeowner. They're thinking about selling their house. They kind of have a pretty good idea that they may or may not be able to get everything under the current CO. All right. They may have done some work, and they're going to have some issues. What's this one thing? If you have to give them a tip, what are some of the tips that you would give them when they have to start thinking about what they're going to do next?
You mean in choosing an expediter?
Well, in general, if they're going to choose an expediter, but what should they be doing? What should they be thinking?
They should be thinking they need a survey. They need a floor plan of their house. If it's something that's existing, they should be, consulting with expediters.
Now, we talked about expediters in general. Before we get into dealing with Accurate a little bit more, if somebody has to hire an expediter, what are some of the questions they're going to sit down and interview that person either on the phone or in person, and to make sure that they're getting somebody who knows what they're doing?
Right. So a homeowner should probably ask how many years you've been in business. They should look at Google references. I mean, references are big. I always ask my clients for references. It's not an easy job because you are, in the go-between, the liaison. So it's references are big. Referrals are big. A lot of my clients call me off of my website, and a lot of people, attorneys refer me, realtors refer me, contractors refer me. So people, word of mouth, referrals from other people.
Client finds you, maybe they watch the podcast, hopefully they watch the podcast, and they decide, and they realize they do need an expediter. Maybe it's a seller who's ready to sell, or maybe it's some more forward-thinking buyer who's buying a house, realizes under the market they're not going to have to waive, they're not going to be able to make the seller get the CO, but once they move in, they want to get that CO fast so that they don't have to worry about it down the road. They're going to be coming to you. What should they expect when they first meet with you?
So when they first meet with me, if they're buying a house, or are you saying?
Well, either way. Let's say it's a seller who knows they're going to have to get a CO, or it's a buyer who's buying it and knows they're going to have to deal with it themselves. So
a seller would come to me and say, selling my house, and I want to check the CO. So because when you go to title, when you do finally go to contract and they do title, it has to match. The CO has to match. So if it doesn't match, people they won't have a good time. It'll get stopped. The sale will get held up. So what they do is they come to me and check the COs. They say, "Oh, we built this 30 years ago." So I tell them this is what you need, and we do the process. And a lot of times I can do the expediting while their house is listed. So by the time they get a buyer and by the time it closes, I'll have the CO in hand. So, and then on the other flip side, so buyers will come to me and say, we're looking at this house. Can you check and see if this CO is? And a lot of times I could do research. I could call up a town and ask them what's on the CO. And then the buyer will say, oh, this is what we're looking at. And they don't have a CO on it. What should we do? And a lot of times I'll tell them, you can close with money held in escrow. A lot of times attorneys will let them do that. And then they'll make the seller get the CO.
What is the one thing? If you have a prospective, accurate expediting services client watching this, and they say, you know what, I'm going to need one. I know I'm going to have to get a CO. I put a pool in. I did a deck, a second-story deck. I added a bathroom, whatever. They're going to call you up, okay? What is the one thing you wish they would know or want them to know before they make that first phone call to you?
I'm not a miracle worker. I am not a miracle worker. I do not have a crystal ball. I do know what I'm doing, so you can be rest assured that I will pay attention to your client. I will do the best I can, and I will hold their hand and make the process easier.
And I think that's what at the end of the day, everything what we've discussed all day is just that the expediter service, whether it's accurate or somebody else provides, is they essentially quarterback. There's no shortcuts. You still have to go through the whole process. But again, they help you through it because somebody like yourself who's dealing with this every day is very familiar with the town, the format that they want things in, and it avoids duplication of work. Takes a lot of the stress away.
Yes. A lot of people have called me up and they're like, Christine, you make me feel so much better. Just talking on the phone. I think I just create a relationship with the people and we get familiar with each other. And a lot of times my clients become my friends.
And one thing to make them, again, I want to be clear is that we're not disparaging any of the building departments in any of the towns. They have a job to do and they serve a public safety benefit. They just have a way, they have a process. And if you're not familiar with the process, it's like going to DMV. It can be very frustrating trying to, register a car. But if you do it every day, like an auto dealership does, the form's no big deal because they understand that it makes sense to them. And that's what you do. You make sense of the process and you quarterback it for a client.
Right. It's not intimidating to me. To a homeowner, it's intimidating. To me, it's not intimidating. This is what I do. So if you're a homeowner and you go to the town, you're overwhelmed. Me, I'm just like, oh, this is what I do. I'm like, oh, here's another one.
Just another day in the office.
Just another day in the office.
Great. Anyway, Christine, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. again, hopefully the information that came out to everybody here was of value. The one thing about real estate expediters and that service, because again, you're dealing with COs, certificates of compliance, and so forth. Virtually every structure that's built on a piece of property is covered by a building code and needs this. Whether you're residential, whether you're commercial, whether you're an owner, buyer, or tenant, this is something that always hits on. For sellers, the one advice I can say is always better to do it early on. Don't wait until the sale, because that's when the pressure starts. That's when things get very interesting, and there's enough pressure already in a transaction. Again, Christine, thank you for being here. Accurate Expediting Services. The contact information will be appearing at the end of this podcast. Again, thank you so much, and thank you everybody for watching.
And thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.